If you're in the market for investment-worthy bags, watches, and fine jewelry, Rebag is the answer. Rebag is a luxury resale marketplace where each piece is carefully vetted and verified by experts to ensure quality and authenticity. If you're in the market, use Rebag to buy and sell finds from the world's top brands, including Hermes, Chanel, and Cartier. Head to Rebag.com to get 10% off your first purchase with code REBAG10. Shop today at Rebag.com. That's REBAG.com and use promo code REBAG10 for 10% off your first purchase.
The following is a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. You've discovered your link to GoPowerCat.com's PowerCat Questions podcast, presented by Fridge Wholesale Liquor, and it starts right now. Now, let's go to the WTC Gig-Powered Studios. Here's your host, GoPowerCat.com publisher, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the PowerCat Questions podcast, brought to you by Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Tim Fitzgerald, Ryan Gilbert, and Zach Carlson, all at home. Not together. It's not like we live together, which would be kind of weird. It'd be a weird sitcom. Two young guys and some old fart. Actually, that might be a good sitcom. Huh. Maybe we'll do that. That'll be a new show at Go PowerCat. Meet the Fitzers. I don't know. This is the podcast in which you ask us questions and we answer those questions about Kansas State sports. Hopefully we have enough questions to do a full podcast this week. We'll see. It's getting a little hard to come up with questions to ask the trained answering monkeys here on this podcast, but we will do our best. As I mentioned, we're sponsored by The Fridge. Get into The Fridge whenever you can, and if you don't want to get into The Fridge, use their app or their website to pre-order, prepay, and have them bring it out to you. And you can drive home safely without ever seeing other human beings other than one kind little Fridge employee who puts it in your car. It's fantastic. The Fridge at the corner, this and that, in the town in which we live. Make sure you get into the greatest liquor store man has ever known, and probably woman too. This first half is sponsored by Tanners. I miss you, Tanners. I love you, Tanners. I want to be back inside you, Tanners. I will be there as soon as I can, Tanners. And we're looking forward to wedding season at Tanners, right, Gills? No.
You got it. Wedding reception season.
You got it. It's going to be a fun time. Maybe I'll just have a wedding reception with no wedding, and everyone can come visit us. Zach, I'd like to sit here and kill some time because I don't know how much time of the questions will take up, but screw that. Let's get going. Here's your questions from Wabash Station.
From Purple Cheese, will Skylar Thompson be considered in the top group of Big 12 quarterbacks this fall?
I don't think so. I mean, he hasn't proven to me that he's up top shelf. Now, you look around the conference and think about who the quarterbacks are. There's some pretty good ones. But, I mean, if you just look at the conference, he could be, but nationwide, maybe not. Skylar's got it in him. We've seen it from him. I have confidence that the game is there, and if he can work on his progressions, reading defenses, not panic and fall into the same habits of fleeing the pocket to his right, I think Skylar can be a really good quarterback. I just don't think he's quite there yet, and I think the second year in the system will help, although losing spring football didn't help. Gills, what are your thoughts on Skylar Thompson?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of him, and I kind of agree with you. Going back to last year, he would have had to have made a big improvement, which I don't think he did. If he wanted to be an elite quarterback in the Big 12 or around the country, I don't think he made that step last year to get to that point this year. So I think he'll be fine. I think he'll, like you said, he'll obviously get better in the second year in the system and stuff like that. But I don't think he's going to be a tier 1 quarterback in the Big 12 next year.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree.
I think if you're saying top group of Big 12 quarterbacks is top half, I mean, I think he'd be in the top 5.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably.
There's 10 schools, like you lose Jalen Hurts. So, whoever OU's quarterback is, yes, they'll be good, but they'll be brand new. I'd probably take Skylar over whoever OU's going to throw out there. You have Sam Ehlinger from Texas, Charlie Brewer from Baylor. I mean, there's only 3 seniors when you include Skylar Thompson. So as far as experience goes, he's definitely in the top, I think. And I think experience will go a long way. I know that Skylar's kind of had some struggles and hasn't been necessarily following the progression that you'd like to see him follow, but at the same time, he does have the experience, and I think that does elevate him at least to the top 5, if not, top 3 or 4, in my opinion.
Very good.
From Wildcat Pilot 88, if you are an opposing coach or kicker, are you kicking to Malik Knowles, Josh Youngblood, or straight out of bounds to allow K-State to start at the 35?
Man, that's a valid question. But this is not a new question for Kansas State football. We've seen coaches make this mistake over and over, including back in the day when Mac Brown, for some unexplained reason, kicked the ball to David Allen and he housed it on him. You don't want to just give up that yardage. I mean, letting someone start at the 35 is pretty significant, and we just can't do that. So I think you'll position the ball. You'll try to kick it through the back of the end zone, whatever you need to do. And punting-wise, you just got to punt to the boundaries and try to pin people up. But, man, if they get out of that, if someone blows an assignment, you're in big trouble because those guys will breach a gap and just be gone. I would be very, very careful. The problem with being very careful is that tells your coverage unit we're being careful. And in turn, they may not go down the field with the same effort. And if the punter or kicker mishits the ball, chaos ensues, which has happened also in the past when the coverage unit thought they weren't kicking to K-State's returners and a mistake was made, and the touchdown resulted. It just adds a whole nother dimension to things for Kansas State because it just wreaks chaos with the other team's special teams.
I think you got to go into Bill Snyder's little bag of tricks and the little pooch kick, 25-yard line, 20-yard line, high in the air, let the special teams, unit get down the field. You're not going to, like you said, Fitz, there's no real threat to that, but you are giving up a little yardage with doing that. So that's what I would do, honestly, going up against K-State's return team.
Well, one thing that's bothered me about K-State's kicking, I know this isn't really the question here, but K-State really hasn't had a kicker, a kickoff guy that can kick it out of the back of the end zone, just boom it, into the stands or past the goalpost, whatever, since Matt McCrane. So that's one thing that frustrates me. So K-State has pretty much always had to kick. It'll land in the end zone and they can take it out or not. But for the most part, K-State's had to return kicks or have the opponent return their kicks. And I think that with Youngblood and Knowles, I would try kicking out of the back of the end zone. And if you can't do that, I mean, you're basically just hoping you can get down there quick enough. And I think that for the most part, you're going to stop them before the 35, but I don't think kicking out of the bounds is a terrible idea either. Also from Wildcat Pilot 88, what would your over-under be on special teams touchdowns this year?
Probably special teams touchdowns. So punts and kickoffs.
4.5.
That's exactly what I was going to say, 4.5.
We had 4 last year, right?
3 kickoffs, 4 kickoffs, because
there's 4 kickoffs. Yeah,
there's a punt.
There wasn't any punts in there. There was a punt too.
It feels like there was a punt.
Nichols? Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking back to 2 years ago.
I don't know, but 4.5 seems comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, think about it. Youngblood had 3, and he only did it for part of the season. In fact, he didn't have enough returns to qualify for the national statistics column, and yet he led the nation in kickoff returns for touchdowns. It made no sense because it was so out of whack.
I'd probably take the over. I think I'd go 5. If I was betting on it, I'd say that K-State's more likely to get 5 than 4, just based on last year, especially with what you said about Youngblood not having really a full season to get everything.
Yeah, and you got to remember Malik Knowles wasn't even that healthy last year too. So, the young blood coming in strong, and then a healthy Malik Knowles, I would like to bet the over as well.
From Purple Cheese, it feels like the Big 12 is already on notice, but does Josh Youngblood get onto the national radar as an electric playmaker this season?
Well, he's got to get more involved in the passing game. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised he wasn't more involved last year. And I think they can find ways to, use him in slip screens and things like that get him into a little bit of space and kind of turns it into a punt return, kickoff return type situation. Maybe they don't feel like his route running has been great. His hands in terms of pass catching have been what they want. I'm not sure. They just didn't have him involved enough in the pass game to make him in the spotlight nationally enough. I think that'll come. I think they'll get there. And so the answer is, yeah, I think he will. As a sophomore, people will really know about him, and certainly having enough time to absorb what he did as a true freshman on kickoff returns will send a message around the country that this kid is something special and you better check him out. But, yeah, I'd like to see him a little bit more woven into the offensive playbook.
So question from Go Power Cat Ryan G for you guys.
Oh.
We talked about Skyler earlier. Who do you think's got a better chance to become, sort of an elite player nationally, or at least kind of in the spotlight? Would you go a quarterback like Skylar Thompson, or would you go for someone a little more flashy like Youngblood, who I think we can agree Thompson's probably a little bit better, but, it's more fun to watch a guy like Youngblood play. We look at, the best quarterback in 2012 and Colin Klein, but, no one wants to focus on that because he's not really fun to watch like Johnny Manziel. So what do you guys think about that?
I'd go Youngblood as far as having that national prevalence, but also Youngblood, to get that national prevalence, he'd probably do it on the return game, 1. 2, he'd do it as a receiver. And if Josh Youngblood is relevant and prevalent on a national stage, I think that elevates Skyler as well. And I think that in order for Skyler to be successful and be, amazing on a national stage, Youngblood needs to be his wide receiver number 1. And I think that, I could see it kind of being a Brandon Whedon. I can't even think of the wide receiver's name. Blackman. Justin Blackman.
Yep.
One of those type combos where they're both, they both make each other better. So that's how I see it.
I think Malik Knowles might get there too. I think Malik might become more of a focus of the passing game, and people might realize that this kid is a big-time playmaker. And he kind of reminds me of a guy that would be at OU. So maybe you'll get some attention this year.
From Adam K63, do you believe that football will be able to do their summer program on June 1st?
I would doubt it. I think we're looking at July 1st before some of this breaks free. I think if you're a football player and July 1st is opened up, you're going to have a miserable July and August. Miserable. I mean, they've got to get you back in shape, not just for competitive reasons, but to protect you from injury. And, without spring practice, I wonder if they'll be able to allocate extra time to get teams better. I mean, I need to check the NCAA rules. Is there a definition of spring practice of the dates it needs to be between? I would think there would be, but with the NCAA, it lets you take some extra practices in July to compensate for the loss of spring practice. Keep in mind, some people got in spring practice, so they're at an advantage. I think it's probably closer to July 1.
Yeah, I even would doubt July 1, at least right now. It's so, again, I know we say, we add a week, it's only been 7 weeks or 8 weeks or however long we've been doing this, each week we say that, but we're still looking, 4 weeks away would be June 1, another 8 weeks is July. It's just, it's tough to say what's going to happen. And with, restrictions as far as stay-at-home orders being lifted and, businesses starting to open up, it'll be interesting to see if cases spike again, if we have to go back to staying inside. Just from that standpoint, I'm a little worried. But I mean, I hope it flattens off and doesn't spike again, because that would be a great sign for starting again in the summer and then having football as scheduled. But the unknowns are just so big that I don't know what to say. I
agree. It's all guesswork. And my guess is July 1, things will start to move as universities prepare to bring on students in the fall and in whatever way they have to. And that would include maybe being able to bring back athletes that need to train.
From D. Brimmer 73, it looks like to me that football is on, and Texas rules the Big 12, and the state is open for business, no matter how many people get sick. What do you think?
Well, Zach, you brought this up on an earlier podcast. I think the Big 12 will be on for football. I think all of these states will accept the risk, or they're in a situation to accept the risk. It gets to be curious with all of college football. You get into some of the states like Michigan or California, or that have more cautious governors. what happens then? What if California says we're not going to let our schools play football, be it high school, college, whatever? What happens to the Pac-12? How do they handle that if 4 of their schools simply can't compete because it's against state regulations or laws or whatever you want to call it? I think the Big 12 will be a go. I'm just curious to see if they get in all their games. I'm curious to see if a school like Vanderbilt goes ahead and plays football. So, there's again, like Zach just said, there's so many unknowns that we face. But I think Big 12 will be go time. Now, there is the possibility that means football starts in October. I don't know. I would think they'd want to get it in as many warm months as possible, because I think if we're going to see a return, it's probably going to be when we get pinned up and inside and concealed and the virus starts to spread again in that winter time when we kind of saw it. Luckily, we had the spring come along and maybe take the wind out of it. But now that's my real threat, is what happens December, January, February, when we're all inside spreading the flu bug, let alone this virus.
Actually, I'm going to kind of hit back at the question here it says Texas rules the Big 12. And yes, while that's true as far as athletics goes, if the university itself, if the athletic department and the university are not on the same page as far as starting, because I think Texas as a university would be one of those schools that would be reluctant to have on-campus learning. I feel like Texas is one of those quote-unquote big brain schools that would try making a decision like that would be, go along with like the Dukes and the Stanfords saying, hey, we're going to, be online for this. Like, we're not going to risk it. We're not going to do this or that because we are who we are. So I wonder if, the athletic departments and universities all across the country are going to have to kind of fight each other and trying to figure out the best course of action going forward.
We're obviously months away from a decision being made, and I'm no expert at all by all means, but I think it's an all or nothing type deal. If there's even 1 or 2 schools out there that are saying no, we're not going to play, I think that's going to set a trend for not only that conference but the entire NCAA. I think it's really going to be not the Big 12 to answer the question, but the NCAA as a whole saying yes, we're going to play, no, we're not going to play. Obviously, it's months away. Who knows what next going to happen? There's so much that's changing every day, but I think it's an all or nothing type deal.
From I Like Pickles Cat, what is the worst K-State game you have ever been to?
Oh, my. Well, mine goes back before Bill Snyder, and it was Austin P game when, I've told this story before, when they threw an incompletion on the last play of the game, but K-State was offside, so they ran the exact same play and scored a touchdown to win the game, and then the players all danced on the Wildcat and was rubbing their butts, like wiping their butts on the Wildcat at midfield, and coaches came out to try to get them off the field, we thought, but no, they participated in the dancing. They ran the same damn play twice, and K-State fell for it twice. Just the first time it was overthrown, and the second time it was completed for a touchdown. The next game, Austin Peay's quarterback broke his leg, and beating K-State was the only game that one AA team won all season. That was the low point. Wow. That was the breaking point for me, and that's how bad K-State football, a miserable one AA team, could win in Manhattan back then. That was my worst experience. It was so bad it was comical, and we had stuck around because there was a Willie Nelson concert after the game, and we got to see K-State lose and then humiliated by the opponents and their coaches.
I would say that the OU game from 2015 is one of the worst ones I've ever been to. But when I think of worst games I attended, I wouldn't consider that one to be it. I would consider the time, it was 2008. K-State lost to Texas Tech 58-28. And I actually thought the score was a lot worse. But, man, I remember sitting through that game and just from the start, K-State was not going to win that game, and I think I stayed for the whole thing, and it was a miserable blowout that K-State had no chance in, and Texas Tech was number 7 at the time.
Can I just pick any game from this last year for basketball?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, you look at that Texas game, boy, that was just miserable. I don't get frustrated often in sports, but I was just so pissed off after that game. I mean, the St. Louis game in Sprint Center, back in December, I mean, just ugly basketball, man. I can't think of a specific game this season, but the entire season was it was not fun at all.
I guess I didn't really think of basketball The whole season was a blur. This was the worst season I ever went to.
It's horrible.
Does that count? From Adam K63, will the basketball staff fill the last open scholarship?
I think they intend to. I don't know whom with at this point. If it'll be, maybe they're just looking for a grad transfer or something. I think their instinct would be to make sure they have it back for next year, so that would indicate a grad transfer. And I guess there's reasons to wait. We're still seeing guys that are deciding, I'm not going to go back to my school because they're not there. They kind of have up until whatever date they need to report to decide that if they're going to go back. And maybe K-State's just going to sit on it and wait to see if something falls in their lap. It might be a pretty good plan, actually.
Yeah, eyes and ears have been open here, and we haven't heard anything as far as a specific player, but I agree with you, Fitz. Just sit back and wait and see what happens. Wake Forest has got all these players transferring, every school that has a coaching change for that matter. So, just taking it easy and seeing what can come to you. I like that kind of philosophy for this team. I think you've definitely got to go grad transfer. You don't want to mess everything up for the coming years. So you have someone older come in, give you some leadership for a year or two, and then that's their time at Kansas State. I think the future is really what you need to be focusing on at this point, and you don't want to add in even more recruits, which it's already pretty much too late to do that. But the freshman and sophomore class is pretty much set. So I think a grad transfer would be great for this team.
Last question of the first half from Adam K63. I saw where K-State is hosting UMKC in basketball next season. Is there a possibility of a return trip to the Pouch of Ouch?
The Pouch of Ouch. I love games in Muni, Municipal Auditorium downtown Kansas City. They play a lot of on-campus games now, but I think bigger ones still play at Muni. I wasn't at the dreaded game back in whatever. I blocked it out. I was at a bowl game, and I was, I think, texting with my buddy Ivan Wilkinson about it, and he was there, and it was just a miserable meltdown by Jim Oldridge team, losing by 50 points at UMKC. It brings back nightmares. K-State should be playing UMKC on a regular basis. It's just an easy piece of scheduling. It's good for them. And even if you go into Kansas City once every 3 games, that's fine. Go play them at Muni and let K-State fans have another opportunity to see your team and play in front of Kansas City fans. Look, we've seen a lot of good players come out of Kansas City and go places other than Kansas State. And increasing your presence in that town can do nothing but help. Nothing but help. And not just basketball, just the university as a whole. Playing in Kansas City would help the university as a whole. So I'm all for it. I'm all for going into Kansas City. I'm all for, if you're struggling to find a game to play in Kansas City, just schedule UMKC at Sprint. I'm down for it. I think it'd be good for their program, and it'd be great for K-State, and at least it has some public interest to it that exceeds your Pine Bluffs and all those other teams you schedule.
Yeah, I like it. I'd love to see them go on the road, and even more so, schedule more opponents that are regional, like Nebraska Omaha or Missouri State. Maybe not go on the road all the time to those places, but maybe every once in a while. It adds a road game, which is important now with the net ratings. And, those are technically winnable games. Yes, it's still a road game and it might be a trap game, but easy games that are close by, that are easy to get to. And, local opponents, especially a lot of these schools, there might be some Kansas kids playing on those other teams. So that might be an interesting story there.
Basically, we're saying bring on the Roos. Right, let's take a break right here, Zach. I tell you what, let's hit the pause right now and go to break. We've got one more question left in the podcast. That's right, one more question left in the podcast, but we're going to use a whole segment to answer it because it's a great question from our friend K-Ned. Just a reminder that Go PowerCat will be having a 60% off sale starting Wednesday morning and running through Friday evening. I think 11 p.m. Central it ends. So you've got basically 3 days here to hop on board. Football season is nearing. Football is going to be here at some point. I am 98.7% confident that we will have some form of football season. We will. And you will want the coverage from all my team at Go PowerCat. 60% off for your first year. So look, I know there's not a lot going on. Just look at it this way. Use that discount for this slower time. You're still going to get a great price and get some great coverage from the guys here in the interim. We're just cranking out all kinds of coverage, doing the best we can to keep K-Staters entertained. And go ahead and grab that VIP price, 60% off your first year between Wednesday and Friday. You're going to love it. Again, that's it for the first half of the podcast. We will be back on the other half. We appreciate the Fridge being our sponsor and the first half sponsor, Tanner's. Zach, Gills, and Fitz. We'll be right back.
Stay locked in. The Power Cat Podcast will be right back.
The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/247 and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Must be 21 plus and present in Iowa. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
We now send it back to Fitz in the WTC gig-powered studios.
Welcome back to the Power Cat Questions Podcast, sponsored by The Fridge. Tim Fitzgerald, Ryan Gilbert, Zach Carlson. That name doesn't really work that well. We're sponsored by The Fridge. Get into The Fridge. They got a great app. They got a great website. They got a great selection. They got great customer service. They got a great store location. They're great. The Fridge, great. I wonder if anyone uses that for advertising. Maybe they should. The segment is sponsored by the High-Low. I'm ready to be inside the High-Low. I will gladly socially distance myself from other people so I can have a slice and a burger from the High-Low. High-Low, I miss you. I want you. I need you. Kind of feels like an old song right there. What was that? Cheap Trick? Did I just go Cheap Trick on you? They're not a cheap trick. It's the High-Low. They're the best. Now here are your questions from Wabash Station. I say questions. Actually, it's a rare question segment. Zach, take it away.
This is the one and only question of the second half, and it's from K-Ned. Are the name, image, and likeness rules going to be a competitive disaster for K-State, or could it help, or is it in the gray area?
If I had to guess, it's going to be a bad thing for Kansas State. I think anytime you've got a big market team, a USC, a Texas, even to a lesser extent Oklahoma, maybe Nebraska just because it rules their entire state, recruits are going to have more opportunities for endorsements and whatever comes of this than a little market like Manhattan, Kansas. And I know this market because I've tried to sell advertising in it for a long, long time. And there's only so many big hitters, and those big hitters get hit up a lot. I mean, the university, anyone who sponsors something is after Briggs and, what was GTM, now Champion, or whatever they go by. All of those things just kind of get run over and over and over with opportunities, and I don't know how much they can help out in this area. This is a wild frontier about to be opened up by the NCAA, and what it means, I'm not sure. I am not sure at all. We'll see. We will absolutely see what comes of this in terms of benefits for Kansas State players, but I think it does put K-State at a disadvantage. I mean, if you're a school like Kansas with basketball, you're going to have a lot of very big donors willing to pay a player for endorsement. That's just how it's going to work. this is going to be a mess. This is going to be an absolute mess. And but it kind of was forced upon the NCAA, and we'll see where it takes us. But I don't think it's going to take us to great places.
I actually disagree, and I think that this is going to be fine. I don't think it's going to have any effect really on a lot of stuff. I don't think there was a message board post I saw about, the Austin market can afford to pay the fifth string walk-on long snapper to endorse whatever, like there's only so many people on a football team or even a basketball team that are worth the marketing or the ad dollars that it would cost to have them endorse something. There's only so much money that is worth it and so much time for these athletes to endorse stuff that, what are you thinking of when a car company is going to have them endorse something? Are they going to give them a car? Are they going to have them do a commercial? Are they going to do something on social media? There's kind of this limited value of what you could pay someone for a legitimate ad service. And I think that you'll see stuff be regulated by the NCAA as far, if someone's getting $1 million for a car deal, I think that's going to be seen as kind of fraudulent there by the NCAA. But this is just name, image, and likeness. It's not changing the rules on boosters being able to give money to players. I think that rule is still going to exist. You're not just going to be able to say, hey, I can pay you $100,000 if you come to K-State and you'll be in this commercial or whatever. That's still against NCAA rules. I don't see stuff like that happening. But where I see this benefiting is not really for the star players. It's for everybody else on the team. It's people, for example, like right now, if you were a student athlete, any sport or whatever, and you made a YouTube channel, you couldn't put ads on your videos, regardless of how many views you get, how popular you are. It doesn't matter, what you're doing. If you're using your name, the NCAA owns your name, and you're not allowed to make any money on it. And a good example is Kylie Ross was a soccer player at Baylor that just graduated, and she would vlog all of the road trips she'd take in the Big 12. It was really interesting, really well put together, and she was good at it, but she wasn't allowed to make a single dollar off of her videos. And the money she'd be making wouldn't necessarily be from anybody that follows Baylor athletics. It's coming from ad companies, commercials that don't have anything to do with sports. So this opens up opportunities for athletes to make money regardless of what they are. It's just, I don't think that the value is necessarily going to be in the star players too. Like, for instance, the top K-State football player right now with the biggest following on TikTok is Tayton Winkle. He's a kicker. Okay, not Skylar Thompson. Tayton Winkle. He's a community college transfer. So he has almost 50,000 followers on TikTok and like 1 million likes. So he's done some kicking videos on there that are cool. But a guy like him, nobody knew who he was until I told you who he was. But if he wanted to make any sort of money off of TikTok from an ad, it probably wouldn't be coming from someone that has K-State ties. And it would be more of a national thing, but he wouldn't be allowed to do it because he's a student athlete. So I think that the whole, this is just going to be a bunch of dirty money thing, I feel like that story's overblown because this allows everyone to be able to make money. And I don't think it's about the star players necessarily. That was a long answer.
In a perfect world, if everyone's playing by the rules, I think K-State's it benefits them. It's a good thing for them. But you look at college basketball. I'm not saying Kansas or Kentucky or Louisville or Duke. I'm not saying any of those schools pay their players or anything fishy's going on. But if there is, then you're kind of back to square one. You're just going back to those teams getting money funneled into to their players from Adidas from whoever. That I think that's what you really have to tackle. That's the challenge if you're the NCAA. I kind of am in the middle with you guys. I agree with what you're saying, Zach, but also I agree with what Fitz is saying. I'm not a huge fan of college athletes getting really anything. But then I listened to what you just said. I mean, if you're just a soccer player who wants to do some vlogging and it has nothing to do with, your actual, playing a sport in the NCAA, as far as where your income comes from, then I think that's totally fine. So it's a tough situation, but the biggest thing for me, the question was about Kansas State. Unless they can tackle that issue that's going on with the bigger schools, and it's not just about the Texas or the USCs, it's about the ones who are, Kansas and the ones that are being investigated by the NCAA. Until that can get really, fixed, I think that Kansas State still is a step behind as a program that, as far as we know, likes to play by the rules and a pretty clean, ran program by Kleiman and Weber and stuff like that. I think until something changes with what happens there, as far as those, schools getting money under the table, I think K-State's still a step behind.
I think another thing you have to remember is there's only a finite amount of talent. And K-State hasn't really been getting the 4 or even 5 stars lately or for a long time. So all of these players that weren't really in K-State's market that they probably weren't going to get, and now if they're able to get more money, is it really that bad of a deal where, you lost the player, but you also didn't have to pay him $500,000, It'll kind of create some competition at the top. And I think that K-State's always been about finding that value player, at least according to the rankings. They get a lot of 2 and 3 stars and they coach them up. I think that there's going to be some sabermetrics or, whatever, just trying to find the numbers as far as value go to build a team, some Moneyball stuff.
So it's not a bidding war because we're not actually paying the student athletes, but how do you avoid that then, Zach? How do you avoid a bidding war that just boom? Because like you said, these top schools are probably going to have, these top players are going to go to some of the better schools. How do you avoid just something like where, a bidding war comes into play where the best players are going to go to the best schools?
I mean, the way I see it is just like right now, the best players are already not going to be considering K-State. So K-State's not even in play. So they're not losing any money, but the school that they end up landing at, that's advertising dollars from somewhere else, that there's a finite amount of money out there that can be spent on student athletes and getting quote unquote student athletes to come to your school and trying to grease them and move them that way once name, image, and likeness is allowed to be profited upon. But I think that if K-State's not a player in those big schools for those big players, I think that it's just going to be about the same. I think that the money's going to translate exactly how it's kind of playing out right now. The best players are going to go to the best schools. And I don't think K-State's going to try getting in any bidding wars with someone that they don't think's worth it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm reading it here, you can get third-party endorsements related to athletics without school or conference involvement, compensation for student-athlete opportunities such as social media, new businesses, or personal appearances without institutional involvement. They go ahead down here and mention something about boosters being involved, but how... Again, so if the way the NCAA has done this in the past, if you've ever farted near a campus, you're a booster of that institution. I mean, they've been so outrageous in their wide swath they sweep with who they define as a booster. So I don't understand. If you're interested in having a student athlete be on your ads, how does that not make you, by the definitions they've used in the past, a booster? And down here it says they can't have activities involving boosters. So I don't know. This is just such a weird play by the NCAA. They've been forced into this, but it's kind of vague. It's unknown. They might be restrictive. And what we've also seen from the NCAA guys is they're not very even-handed in how they hand out penalties. Some schools can get away with stuff and some schools can't. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's always been that way with the NCAA. Help us out. Self-report will be lenient on you, except if you're Missouri softball, we'll absolutely hammer you. And so I don't really understand the NCAA. there's so many problems with the NCAA. This is just going to magnify some of these issues. The NCAA has to do some major house cleaning and be more strict and more even-handed in how they handle all of these things. This is the penalty for this. This is the penalty for that. Everyone, whether you're Nicholls State or University of Kansas or Alabama, are subject to the same rules and penalties. And they've just been so unfair about how they hand out bowl bans, scholarship limitations, recruiting limitations. It's kind of pick and choose whatever we think. They nailed USC. Other schools have gotten by with similar things. It's just very frustrating to watch the NCAA operate. And this is going to be a massive amount of confusion for them. Just reading through this thing as it appears now on the NCAA site, their Q&A, it's going to be massive misunderstanding of what the rule is and how it'll be applied. I think it is a disadvantage for K-State because there will be some kids that might choose, maybe it's not at all what they can actually land, but if you're, let me pick out a school here. If you're Colorado and you're recruiting a kid, hey, we got the Denver market. Think about all your advertising opportunities you're going to have in the Denver market that you wouldn't have in Manhattan, Kansas. Now, maybe there's no reality to that, but it's a good piece of leverage to use on a kid that's sitting on the fence that, I will have better opportunities if I want to sell my TikTok. And maybe we should get into some TikTok advertising, Zach. You want to be in charge of our TikTok budget? It's just fun to say.
Fitz, I will say it. We should not be advertising on TikTok. That is not our target demo. I would also say the same as Instagram.
Are you saying that we have an older demographic that cannot dance? Is that what you're saying, Zach?
I'm saying that our listeners and our users are probably not on TikTok, and they probably wouldn't even spell it right.
Yeah, you're probably right. Okay, so we will advertise on MySpace.
I don't even know if that exists.
Then we're going to save a lot of money right there.
There we go.
There we go. I don't know. Guys, this will be fascinating. It really will. I know this. It'd be a violation for us to have any student athlete do anything because that's the overlap. I don't know. It's crazy. But this has been a good topic. The KNED half of the Power Cat podcast is behind us. Not a lot of questions this week. KNED put up a lot of historical stuff that I got dizzy looking at. My little quarantine brain couldn't handle it. I appreciate the effort. I'm going to go dig into it.
I appreciate the effort. I don't know if we will ever actually answer that question on the podcast, KNED, because I don't think anybody wants to listen to me reading that out loud for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was.
I appreciate the effort, though, but I think that I think that that's going to stay on the cutting room floor for the considerable future, KNED. I'm very sorry.
He's very thorough. He's very, very thorough. And we've tried to be thorough in this edition of the podcast. I don't know how thorough we were, but I felt like we've bonded a little bit. We better understand each other because Zach's all about the money, and I'm scared, and Gil's, I don't know. I don't remember what you said.
Pizza.
Thanks for listening to the Power Cat podcast. We will talk to you next week with a whole nother edition if you have questions. If not, we might think of something else to do, like my favorite show tunes, and I'll just sing to you. That should be good incentive for you to all ask questions for next week's podcast. And remember, the Overtime podcast lands on Friday. We don't really need sports for that because it's stupid.
You've been listening to the Power Cat Questions podcast, presented by Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Power Cat Podcast. All rights reserved. GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street Publishing.
Hey there, it's Gary Parrish with the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, part of the CBS Sports Podcast Network. We are still in the early weeks of conference play, which means there's no better time to tap in. Every Sunday night and Wednesday and Friday mornings, you can expect an episode in your feed highlighting everything you need to know from the sport of college basketball. Conference races, bracketology, coaching rumors. We'll talk about it all and be there with you at least 3 times a week as March Madness approaches. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. To find us, search for Eye on College Basketball in your podcast app of choice.